You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is March 19th, 2025, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. Today, we have a returning guest, Lars Mapstead. We interviewed him about a year ago and a little bit before that as well on his run for the Libertarian Party the National Libertarian Party's nomination for the presidency. And we're going to find out a little bit about how that campaign went and some of his thoughts about that and what he's doing now. And we'll also talk a little bit about, get some of his thoughts on what's going on with the some of the chaos in the current administration. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to the rest of our panel. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And our lower left-hand corner, we have Lars Mapstead, our guest. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. We always start out the show with a Liberty quote to kind of set the stage. And I actually thought this one was a pretty good quote because it's kind of what Lars was after, and that was to be the presidential nominee. And this one comes from Harry Browne. So Harry Browne was the presidential candidate for the party in 1996 and 2000. I thought this is almost spot on to some of Lars' thoughts on the whole system. He says, conservatives say the government can't end poverty by force, but they believe it can use force to make people moral. Liberals say government can't make people be moral, but they believe it can end poverty. Neither group attempts to explain why government is so clumsy and destructive in one area, but a paragon of efficiency and benevolence in the other. I guess, we just see both these parties being wrong constantly, and somehow people just aren't getting the clue to find the truth over in the Libertarian Party. But what do you guys think about this quote? I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Harry Browne, and I've read a couple of his books, and I coined this a little bit differently. Basically, what I said is that both sides, left or right, want to use government force to push their agenda, and they believe that they have the moral high ground when doing that. But they really don't like it when the other side is using government force to push their agenda on them. And so we have this continuous battle back and forth between the two sides, trying to gain the upper hand in using government force to tell everybody else how to live their lives. And we would be a lot better off in the world, in America, if we, instead of using government force, we just let people live their lives the way they see fit, as long as they're not harming other people. And I think that this quote here gets directly to that point.
Yeah,
well
I would
said.
agree.
Tim, any thoughts?
And I don't think government can end poverty by force, nor can they make people moral, nor do I think they can end poverty. So I don't think they can do it. I mean, they may think they can, but they can't. And I only have history as my guide.
They can sure create poverty, and they can sure create war.
Oh, they can definitely do that. They can definitely use force. Excellent at that, as we see even now with all the stuff going on. Houthis, cough, cough, Houthis, and so on. That's it. Yeah, so they can't do anything at all.
There's another Harry Browne quote, which is the government's great at breaking your leg and giving you a crutch to as the pit, right?
That's another good one.
Yeah, I saw that one. I was thinking about it, but I actually thought this one was kind of spot on for the show with you. So anyways, let's start getting into the show. So I want to give people a little bit of a refresher of what it was you stood for, and so we showed the video before Unrig the System, but I thought it was a really good video. So we're just going to show it again real quick so people can get a sense of kind of the overview of what it was your campaign was about. So James, can you play KOL 1?
If I say the system is rigged, that brings up something in your mind. Maybe it's education, maybe it's the economy, healthcare, something like that. Everybody has an idea of why the system is rigged, and it's causing division in our country, because when you don't feel like the system is fair and equal, it agitates you. They'll tell you how to run your life, and then they'll completely do the opposite thing. No, there's no accountability. And when you start putting this whole picture together, it feels overbearing that the system is so rigged. What can we do as people? Congress is not doing their job so that they don't have to be responsible when things are falling apart. Part of unrigging the system is to start chopping away at this bureaucratic state and make them do their job. So one of the things that I think would fix some of the problems is term limits. And I say, if you haven't figured out how to do your job in 12 years, you probably shouldn't have the job in the first place. Our whole election system is rigged. We need a whole overhaul of our entire election system. I never planned to enter politics, but witnessing our government becoming increasingly authoritarian and hypocritical, I could no longer idly sit by. This election will likely pit Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the exact same candidates we had last time, against each other. Many Americans are fed up with these choices. They feel like they have no other option. We libertarians must present a credible alternative to the duopoly candidates. If we can get just 36 electoral votes, we can prevent either of them from winning and force the duopoly to listen to us. This is a great opportunity for us, and we must not waste it. Let's unite to make the Libertarian Party a powerful force, demonstrating that individual liberty, limited government, and free markets are the keys to a prosperous future for everyone. I'm not part of any caucus. I'm not looking to become part of any caucus. What I'm looking to do is work with people that are good people that have a good message. If you're ready for bold action, support me, Lars Mapstead.
That was an excellent video. Can you tell us a little more about it?
It was kind of fun watching that again. It's been a while, it's been, I don't know, 6 or 9 months since I watched that. And so it was kind of fun to see it again, remind me of the chaos that was a couple of years of my life there running for president of the United States. But, it's a lot of those things still resonate with me, and they're still driving me in my vision of what I'm trying to do right now, which is, that whole talking about the system is rigged, and that we keep having this illusion of choice between these candidates, and we keep being forced to choose between the lesser two evils. And, I've kind of honed that whole scenario to the point now where I basically have come to the conclusion that we have two private NGOs running American politics. That's the RNC and the DNC, and they're private corporations. They're not beholden to the people, and they run everything. And there's literally like 8 people in Congress that run Congress, and everybody else has to get in line. And so we don't really have a republic anymore. We have basically 2 private corporations running everything, and we're just along for the ride. And I don't think that's what our founding fathers had intended at all. And so that's sort of what I've launched my new ventures into, is trying to basically unrig those things. I'm still on the trail to try to unrig the system. I'm just not doing it from the presidential campaign at this point. I'm doing it behind the scenes, working on ballot access and working on basically making the system more transparent and more fair for everybody.
Yeah, that definitely is one of the biggest problems that we have. In fact, your running mate Larry Sharp has run into that same issue, where he has tried running in New York, and he actually made it on the ballot one year as governor, or to run for governor, and then the next election series, because he actually made a little bit of dent into that election, they made sure that he couldn't get back on. Yeah. So they changed all the rules on him. So so it sounds like this is kind of the mission that you've kind of pulled out of this this campaign run now is a ballot access type of mission, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it turns out that if you want to run as an independent candidate in America, you need 1 million signatures to get on the ballot in all 50 states. And those signatures all have to be collected within a very short period of time. Every state is different. And the thing is, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you only need 60 to 70,000 signatures, and those are basically gimmies. Right. So you need to run as an independent candidate about $20 to $25 million just for signature gathering. And, that's out of reach for most people. So that pretty much just basically cuts everybody off at the knees and makes sure that there's just no competition at all. We saw that with Kennedy, right? He ran, he was able to get those signatures in New York that even the Libertarian Party wasn't able to get. And then when it came come to shove, the Democrats sued him and said that he didn't put the right address on the paperwork, and so therefore the 125,000 New York residents who signed that they wanted to have him on the ballot were disenfranchised, and they basically just threw them all out and said it was worthless. And that was, they spent $1 million or $2 million just on that thing alone. And the Democrats and Republicans, depending on what state it is, they just change the rules. And what's really crazy about it is that your remedy is to go to the court system, right? On these things, and so you can go to the court and say, "Hey, court, this isn't right. These people are, keeping me off the ballot." But it turns out that the courts, the judges are all appointed, okay, and the judges are appointed by partisan politicians, essentially. So you have left-leaning judges and you have right-leaning judges, and they have an incentive to rule against you and rule in favor of their party. And if they don't do that, they don't get appointed to the next higher judge area. So they're very much beholden, to partisan politics, even though they're supposed to be independent and they're supposed to be, judicial, and they're just not. They are very partisan, and they will, screw independents and third parties all the time with really no remorse at all, it's amazing. But we have to fix that too. The whole judge system is completely corrupt and broken. And you hear Trump talking about it with Elon today about, how these, but it's on both sides. It's both Republicans and Democrat judges. They're just all beholden partisans. And so they can't make fair judgments, which is, I think, totally wrong and not in what was intended in our founding documents, and the idea of what we were supposed to have, this check. The judicial system is supposed to be a check on the Congress and on the executive branch, but they're just not. They're just not.
Yeah. It definitely sounds like a rigged system, even in the courts, which is what I guess, if you're naive, that's where you're hoping it'll get unrigged.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it's kind of disheartening to hear all that, I guess. But like you say, we see this play out in politics every day, where judges seem to step into the mix. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show as well, about some of the stuff that's currently going on. But I did want to follow up a little bit about your experience running at the convention. We did have a little bit of video of you at the convention, and so I think it might be kind of fun for viewers to see maybe just a little bit of a glimpse of what it was like at the convention. Certainly there was a lot of noise around where people have seen clips of Trump and RFK there, but you were one of the candidates, and it's like a lot of times those things don't make the bigger news. So let's watch the clip KOL 2, where we can see Lars speaking a little bit in some of the endorsements that he was getting.
Okay. My name is Barry Short. I'm the chair of the Utah Libertarian Party. The spirit of America is the spirit of initiative and entrepreneurship. And for that reason, I am proud to give my support to Lars Mapstead to be our candidate for President of the United States.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Hewitt from California. I'm a former mayor and a county supervisor. And I am out here to tell you that I'd love to see Lars Mapstead inside closed sessions, up in front of people, and changing this country the way only he can. I wholeheartedly endorse Lars Mapstead for President of the United States. Thank you.
If we want to unite this party, there's one man who can do it. That's Lars Mapstead. If we want to be able to make impact and raise money, Lars Mapstead. If we want to retain ballot access, Lars Mapstead. The only man who can do all of these things is the man I'm bringing on right now, and the man who you need to vote for in the first round here, the man himself, Lars Mapstead.
Thank you, libertarians, for being principled this weekend. While other parties talk about what they want from government, we talk about what we don't want for government. And there's quite a bit I don't want from government. I don't want a government that tells me whether I can build a shed or paint a mailbox or plant a tree on my own property. I've been there. I've done that. And I bet you have too, and I bet America has. I don't want a government that forces our kids into schools that fail them. I don't want a government that locks us in our homes for our own safety, mandates treatments, and leaves our grandparents to die in nursing homes. I don't want a government that steals from our children and our children's children through reckless spending and inflation. I don't want a government that sends our youth to die in wars that last generations. I don't want a government that censors speech and the right to protest. I don't want a government that takes away your religious liberty. I don't want a government that strips us of our right to bear arms. Together we can deal a death blow to the two parties and start down the path to setting the world free in our lifetime.
So I thought that was kind of interesting seeing that, because I, not being at the convention, I know I didn't get to see that, and so it was kind of interesting seeing some of these people like Larry Sharp and Hewitt and some of the others come up there and endorse you. So that was certainly positive. Of course, it was I guess a long voting ordeal, I guess. I'm not sure if this is the way it plays out every time, but Jane, maybe you could bring this up. Wikipedia, I guess, has a map, and it shows sort of how many rounds this thing went. I guess it went like 6 or 7 rounds, I guess, until they finally had a candidate. And so it sort of shows how people fared. And of course, Chase Oliver wound up getting everything in the end. But yeah, so just curious, what were your thoughts? I mean, how did the process work out for you? Is it what you expected when you were there?
I think I went into it a little naive, to be honest with you. I thought that the party would care more about action and would care more about getting something done. And for me, this is my personal take on it. It felt like the party was more about getting back at each other. That there's a left-right kind of a thing going on inside the Libertarian Party, just as there is in most of America. And I feel like that the two candidates that were kind of the front runners were basically representing the left and the right of the party. And I wasn't a vote that would piss off the other side, basically what it came down to. And so they wanted to vote for, a candidate that would piss off the other side. It's literally that. And I like I said earlier, I was kind of the third party candidate inside the Libertarian Party. And so the hypocrisy and the irony of all that wasn't lost on me. But, it was a great experience. And, even any of the guys who had won, we would have all had similar outcomes. And the reason that is because the system is rigged, and it doesn't really matter who runs as the Libertarian candidate. The media is against them. The duopoly is against them. The finances aren't there, and it just the rigging just goes on and on and on. So, I was fine with it. And like I said, I had pledged to spend another $1 million. I spent $1 million on the campaign, and I had pledged to spend another $1 million. And so by not winning, I saved $1 million, which I think was a good consolation prize.
Yeah.
Is it safe to assume that Miriam Adelson did not offer you $100 million for your campaign?
No.
Well, one of the things, I guess, it was quite contentious, I guess, as far as the dynamics that had gone into the party this year. Like you were saying, people sort of lining up on sides. I know Rechtenwald seemed to be sort of the favorite going into the whole thing. He had the backing of the Mises caucus, and a lot of people thought that was going to be enough, but it turned out to be just a few percent short. Is what it sounds like. So he just couldn't quite get over that hump. Yeah. And then Chase Oliver, I guess he didn't come in with as big of a block to start with, but it sort of evolved to him getting enough votes over the evolving runs. And we've interviewed Chase a few times, but certainly he's like the polar opposite side of the Mises caucus within the Libertarian Party. I mean, there's a lot of commonality in the Libertarian Party, but there's also some very strident differences, I guess.
That's true. And I think Mike Tremont going on as the VP for Chase, I think was a big factor in pushing it over the line for him, because he was able to pull that. And a lot of, the people that had voted for me, the way that it works is you drop off and then those people are freed up to vote for the kind of the next person. It's sort of like ranked choice voting, but in sort of real time. And so, so my people ended up going over and a lot of them, my people were supporters of both Chase and Mike Tremont. And I think that kind of helped push them over the edge in the end. And so, but yeah, it was contentious, and we were going till still 1 a.m. We were still voting, and it was, the voting went on for 5 hours or something like that. It was crazy. So, yeah.
Well, just so people can get a sense, I have a very short video of Chase being interviewed after the win, so I think it might be worth just showing people so they kind of understand what the outcome was. So, James, can you play KOL 3?
It took 7 hours of deliberation and voting, with the party eventually choosing Chase Oliver. Oliver making history as the first openly gay candidate to win their party's presidential nomination.
I ask for your support in this election. I ask for your support the day after this nomination takes place. We will travel all over the country, spreading this message, building our party, supporting our activists, and supporting a broad, powerful message of liberty together.
For those who don't know you, your 30-second elevator pitch.
My name is Chase Oliver. I'm a 39-year-old candidate for president of the Libertarian Party, and I'm fighting for each and every individual's right to own their own body, their own business, their own property, and their own life. Keep that out of the hands of the government.
And so I'm just curious, I guess, obviously Chase didn't wind up winning, and, we certainly were hoping that he'd win here, but I guess, are you optimistic, I guess, about the future of the Libertarian Party at this point? Because clearly we didn't have as good of a finish as we'd hoped for in the end, and now we just recently had a change at the head of the Libertarian Party. Yep. So in fact, James, maybe you could bring up the visual here. There's an article from Reason, and it just shows the pictures of the people involved. That's the main reason I put it up here. But this gentleman here, Stephen Nikhaila, he wound up becoming the new chair. And I believe McCardle took a job with RFK's new gig, I guess, over in the Trump administration. So at least that's what I'd heard last. So just curious, I mean, do you have any insights or any thoughts as far as, what your thoughts are on the party going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've kind of come to the conclusion that, we have to change the rules. We have to change the system. And it's like, the parties, will continue on and it will do its thing and it will help get some people elected. But if we want to have a real voice in national politics, we need to have a complete change in what we're doing, right? And that's not really a change necessarily from inside the Libertarian Party. It's a change in the system that we are part of. In order to affect change, in order to get our voices heard, we have to unrig the system. It's still the same message as what I was pushing out there before, and that is that we have to make it easy for more candidates to get on the ballot. We have to make it easier for citizens to be able to vote and to know that their vote was counted properly and that there isn't shenanigans going on. And so until we do those things, and until we change the situation with the judges that I was talking about, it's going to be really difficult for us to gain any traction at the national level. And so, for me, I knew going in that I wasn't going to win and be president of the United States. I mean, no libertarian goes in thinking that they're going to do that. That'd be delusional. The reason I picked going for president, because a lot of people are like, Lars, why didn't you run for city council or governor or mayor or something else where you could actually win? And the reason I ran for president is because it gives you a voice that you wouldn't get any other way. I got national media attention. I got on 13 national polls with the word libertarian next to my name, where people were on seeing my name on Fox News, and they were listening to me on radio shows all the country. And if I was running for mayor, those radio stations and those TV shows would not put me on the air, right? So I was able to get a voice that I wouldn't normally have. And that was the whole reason I ran, for president, was so that I could bring a voice, a louder voice to national politics than I could any other way. I mean, I'm a marketer. I'm a businessman and a marketer, and I quickly saw that if I wanted to reach the most people possible, the best way to do that would be to run for president of the United States, where people give you some attention and credibility that you just wouldn't have any other way.
And maybe a good example of that is Hewitt, who endorsed you. A lot of people say he's held the biggest office of any libertarian so far, being I believe he was a supervisor in Riverside County in California.
Yeah, and it's got 2 million constituents or something like that. So it was a big office.
Yeah. And so, like, as somebody who, follows Reason and some of these other libertarian news outlets, I'd heard of him, but I doubt hardly, like you're saying, almost anybody who's not somehow following libertarian threads would necessarily know who he is, unless you were in California.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Right. And I mean, I think, the thing is like Chase Oliver, I talk to people a lot, and I'll say something about libertarian, and they'll say, "Oh, I voted for Chase Oliver, or I knew about Chase Oliver, or something like that." And so, it does work. It does get our name out there, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to attract a candidate that will be a very principled libertarian candidate that also has a huge name. Because name recognition is really what it's all about. If you had a celebrity running, the media would pay attention to that, and you'd get lots of media attention, and then people would say, "Oh, what's this libertarian thing?" They would pay attention to it. But unless you have a big name, it's basically just sidelined by the media, and even even if you had significant sums of money, and I'm talking like $20 or $30 million, it's still kind of buy your way in, by buying advertising on different radio stations and TV stations, and then they'll interview you. It's a total pay to play game, right? And but if you're not buying ads on their stations, they just they're not going to pay attention to you. And so that's a little, obviously the media has a incentive to interview the top two because it's clickbait, right? It gets people watching. It's exciting or whatever, but adding in the third, fourth, and fifth options, it doesn't really cut it. I mean, I'd like to see a complete change in the way we do our electoral politics, and that's kind of some of the proposals that I put out there. But one thing I would really like to see is open jungle primaries for presidential race, where essentially we have 400 or 500 names on the primary ballot of all the people who are running for president that qualify, that meet some very mellow criteria. You guys are in California, so you remember when we had the recall.
Schwarzenegger.
We had the recall, and there was 500 names on the ballot, right? And people were able to find out of those 500 names the person that they wanted to vote for, right? And so I'd like to see that, and then I'd like to, after the primary, we whittle it down to like 10 guys and gals, and then those people go on to the debates, and we listen to all 10 of those people instead of just the two parties, and then people can decide between the top 10 who they want to have represent them, as president of the United States. I think that would be a much better system than the system that we have right now, which is just completely it's a controlled duopoly, but it's basically a monopoly granted by the two private corporations that are running everything, right?
Yeah, it is funny too when you bring that up for Californians. When Gray Davis wound up being recalled, we had such an odd slate of candidates. I remember there was one news show or something where it looked like a town hall, and it was just all candidates. And it was like Gary Coleman from the show Different Strokes. You had who'd been working, I guess, as a security guard, and then you had Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then you had I think some porn actress and a whole bunch of other people. It's just a huge slate of different people. Of course, Schwarzenegger had the most name recognition, so he kind of rose directly to the top. But
and that whole thing was really interesting too, because I remember that very clearly. The way that they talked about it on the TV stations, they didn't make it clear that in order to have the runoff, they had to vote out Gray Davis first, right? So it was really two votes. It was like, do you want to get rid of Gray Davis, yes or no? And if enough people win and say that you're gone, then who do you want to be the replacement, right? And so, but they didn't really say that on the news. What they said was, we're getting rid of the governor, and then you've got to pick the new guy, right? And so people just kind of went into it thinking it was a done deal, and I think it just materialized that way. And it was, I felt like that was huge manipulation by the media. I think they really pulled the wool over Californians' eyes there.
Yeah, it is interesting because we've had a few recall attempts since Gray Davis on our current governor, Gavin Newsom, and the system doesn't work that way. It's just a Republican, it looks like, running against him. I don't even know if anybody else was on the ballot.
Oh, there was hundreds of people, and this
really?
last one, there was a lot of people on the ballot again. It wasn't quite as big as the Schwarzenegger one, but there was 100 people probably on the ballot.
Okay, well, maybe the media was just controlling it better then, because all I remember seeing at the end was Larry Elder, and I kind of was hoping that he would get it because, in my opinion, anything is better than the current setup that we have. But anyways, yeah, that was unfortunate, but. Yeah, so I guess I did want to find out about a little of the materials that you had to share on the access. I don't know if that's anything that you wanted to elaborate on. You had your ballot access map, and you had a few other documents that you wanted to share.
Yeah, so basically, I'm working with this organization here. I'm on the board of this organization, More Voter Choice, and what we're basically doing is we're going around and we're litigating in states and we're lobbying states to change their ballot access rules so that it's easier for people to get on the ballot. The idea is that the Libertarian Party, and this isn't just for the Libertarian Party, it's for all parties and independents and everybody, but we spend a huge amount of money every election cycle just to maintain or get on the ballot access, right? To get the ballot access in each state. And when I was in Maine, we were able to get major party status there in Maine, and that kind of showed me this idea that we could change the rules in the states. By lobbying and legislation and that sort of thing. So this ballot access index here, I'm working with Larry Sharp and Richard Winger and Bill Redpath, and heavy hitters in the ballot arena for the Libertarian Party. And this ranks all the states from best to worst as far as the ability to get on the ballot, right? And so we're active in multiples of these states. We just literally helped defeat a bill in Wyoming that was going to make it so that only Republicans were allowed on the ballot. And I'm not kidding you. That literally was the bill that they were trying to put through. And we're currently working on an issue in New York where they're trying to undo that thing that you were talking about earlier, where they screwed Larry Sharp off of the ballot. There's an opportunity that might be able to be undone. And so that would be a really great thing, because instead of spending the money over and over again, we could just spend it one time and have dividends for years to come, which I think is a much better use of our money. And then we'd have money to actually campaign instead of just paying states and government agencies for the privilege of being able to run for office, right? So so that's what that ballot access is all about. And I recently went to a Secretary of State convention in DC and talked to probably 25 or 30 secretaries of state, and it was all over the map. Some of them thought that it was a great idea to fix voting, and then others were like, I think it's great that the system is rigged because my party, the Republicans, or my party, the Democrats, are winning, and so why would I want to change it? And so it's kind of all over the map. This document here is essentially, we came up with a model for ballot access. What we would like to see, if we could wave a magic wand and get every state to get on board, this is what ballot access would look like for each state. And it's signature requirements, the time to get those signature requirements and what the documents look like, because some of the states are really draconian. And this would be just kind of a thing that we'd like to see occur. What's interesting about this right now is that you hear Trump right now talking about how he wants to make a national voter ID law, right, where everybody would have to present a voter ID. Currently, the states are in charge of their elections, and it's not a federal issue, right? But if Trump pushes that it's a federal issue, and the Supreme Court agrees that you can basically force people to get voter ID, that's going to essentially turn it into a federal issue, which means that the federal government would also have control, if they wanted to, over ballot access and over the fees and all that kind of stuff that would be required. So you might see a sea change in the way that elections are run if Trump is able to push through voter ID. I personally am like a fan of the states retaining their own autonomy, but if he goes down that road, it would make it easier to push for more federal oversight in different elections. So
yeah, it seems like a very double-edged sword, because if if you get the right person in there, maybe it opens it up for everybody. But if you get the wrong person in there, maybe it just rigs the game even more.
Yeah. I mean, the one good thing that it would do is it would mean that there'd be a single point to attack, instead of us having to attack 50 separate states and all their different laws and everything. If they made it all federal, then you could just push on that one lever to try to get better ballot access. So I think it would make my job easier. But like I said, I'm for states having their autonomy. I don't really like the federal government being the all-seeing, all-powerful thing, because when we see what happens when the federal government gets involved, we get things like the IRS and the Federal Reserve, and two things that I loathe. So I don't really need any more federal anything really in my life.
Yeah, that's pretty crappy every time they decide people want to bring everything. That always seems to be one of the problems that I think about with Republicans, is because so often Republicans, they sound like the antidote to the Democrats of just big government, everything. But so many times it just feels like the Lord of the Ring analogy, where they get a hold of the ring and we're yelling, "Cast it into the fire now, cast it into the fire." And they say, "No, I can use this ring."
Yeah,
that's
good analogy.
Yeah,
very good analogy. Yeah, no, I mean, and you see it right now is that, in the continuing resolution that's just, been going through Congress, you see exactly that. They talk about, all my life, they've been talking about how they're fiscally conservative. We had the Tea Party, and we were all excited the Tea Party was going to finally, cut into government and reduce the debt and all that kind of stuff. And every time they get into power, they basically just waffle. And they wait until the Democrats seize back control of one of the two parts of Congress, and then they just blame the Democrats for not being able to do the thing. But they have 2 years right now to do the thing, and they're not going to do anything. It's clear after watching the continuing resolution that they're going to continue to up the debt. I have a pin post on X right now that that has been up there for a few months since Trump got elected, and it basically says the debt will be bigger in 4 years. The authoritarian state will grow more over the next 4 years. The bureaucracy and the swamp will grow more over the next 4 years. And so, nothing, and it's not even a hard prediction, right? Because I've just seen it happen every single presidency of my entire life. It's like the Republicans are really good at talking a lot and then doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, that brings up, I was going to save this for just a little bit later in the show, but we have seen this push by the Republicans recently on Doge, and Jane, maybe you could bring this up. There's all kinds of wild claims about what Doge is, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is kind of an oxymoron, but the idea that you can make government more efficient, and certainly if there was anybody that, an outsider like Elon Musk seems like kind of at least a better stab at it than just a regular old politician. But it is bringing up the problem that you're talking about, because regardless of what the size of the cuts that Doge has been getting at, they just passed this continuing resolution like you're talking about, where it's looking like they're just going to continue with all the same spending levels. Now they're talking about some strategies like rescission and other things, but this led to the absurdity of Trump going after Thomas Massie and talking about getting rid of him. And in my opinion, this is like the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I mean, this is the guy who, for anybody who hasn't seen that movie, it's kind of about this innocent guy who goes to Washington and wants to change the whole system. And so they try and do him in practically. But that's kind of the story of Massie here. He's just holding to his guns and says, "Hey, I'm just going to do what's right." And they seem to be coming after him with all barrels. But what are your thoughts on this? Because in my mind, if there is a libertarian in Congress, the only two that come close is Thomas Massie and Rand Paul. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I would say, like, I don't know what the percent is, but he's the closest he's the closest in Congress to my belief system. I guess I'll say that. And I disagree with him on a few things, but in general, he's pretty principled, and he certainly is, for reducing government and reducing debt, and you've seen that in his voting, record, kind of a thing. And so, it's ridiculous that Trump and the administration they're talking about how they're chopping away at the debt and the deficit and that sort of thing, and it's clear that they're not, because they just literally are past the same exact spending as they had before. They're going to fund all the same stuff, and I was hopeful that they might do something, but it's just I think part of it is that you have Congress. And Congress is the one that is going to, put through the bill or not. And I kind of was saying, if Trump had any real principles, he would just veto that, right? And he'd make them go back to the drawing board and start again. But it's clear that he's not really that concerned about the national debt. I mean, under his last administration, the debt went up something like $9 trillion or $10 trillion or something like that. It was like from 20 to almost 30 or something like that under his last term. So, I expect the debt to go up another $6 to $8 trillion over the next 4 years. So, I mean, and to that point, we have some serious structural economic issues coming down the pipe. I don't know if you follow like Ray Dalio or any of the, economic kind of mavericks that are out there, but he basically says that this year we have something like $20 trillion of debt that has to be refinanced, and that there isn't buyers for that debt. And so basically interest rates are going to spike this year dramatically in order to help fend that off, and we may end up just getting the government printing a bunch more money again. And deflating our way. I've always said that we're going to deflate our way out of the debt, which means that we're just going to reduce the value of the currency in everybody's pocket to the point of zero in order to basically pay off the debt with fake dollars, basically, right? It's all a charade, and that's that gets into the whole Federal Reserve and fiat currency, and what a house of cards all that crap is, and that our banks aren't actually sound because they don't actually hold any money. It just goes on and on. There's so much corruption, and I feel bad for the American people, because it's kind of hard to wrap your head around all of these pieces when you're just trying to work and put food on the table. This isn't something you should have to think about, right? But unfortunately, it affects all of our lives, and people won't really even know where all the inflation is coming from. For the next round, right? Is the government will print all this money to pay off the debt, and then we'll all be suffering for it. And then they'll say, "Oh, it was this president or was that president," but in the end, it was just the Federal Reserve just screwing us all enormously.
Yeah.
And if I might nitpick a little, we're not really going to be paying off the debt. We're just going to be turning the debt over again.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yes.
We're going to use credit card B to pay off credit card A.
100% at a higher interest rate.
At a higher interest rate.
Yeah, because we're not smart enough to refinance at a lower interest rate. We're going to refinance at a higher interest rate.
Yeah.
Right, because we're up against, like you exactly described, we're up against the less people willing to buy the debt, and governments and everybody less of those willing to buy the debt at those prices. So they're going to have to raise the prices that they will get back in the future for buying that debt, and those are higher interest rates.
Yeah. I remember I voted for Ross Perot. He had all his charts, and he was yelling about the debt. And I think, what would he think now? When he was yelling about the debt, it was at like $1 trillion or something like that, or $2 trillion, right? And now we're at 36 trillion. That guy would be losing his mind right now.
Now we're 122% of GDP over that, actually, and back then I think it was in the 50s.
Yeah. And he was sounding the alarm bells then, and so was Ron Paul, right? And both of them are sounding the alarm bells, and it's like at some point, the chickens come home to roost on this thing, and the fallout is going to be great suffering by the American people, and it may be close. It may be within the next couple of years that happens. I don't know, but I'm honestly surprised that we've gotten away with it for as long as we have. that those guys were sounding the alarm bells, and I thought for sure, when Ron Paul was talking about it, that like it was imminent that we were going to blow up, but they keep somehow magically pulling us out of the sand there, and I guess it's just because they just keep printing more money.
So the Keynesians will say, you guys have been complaining about this for the last 4 decades and nothing's happened. It's like,
that's where
obvious debt is no issue whatsoever. So let's just keep piling it on. Go ahead.
And that's where they come in with their MMT. Then they say, well, because nothing bad has happened yet, then magic monetary theory, nothing bad ever will.
No, don't say MMT. We'll all catch fire, and we'll all be burning. The MMT is the grossest stuff ever.
Speaking of setting money on fire, in retrospect, do you think there would have been maybe a better way for you to have spent your $1 million for the increased exposure you did get?
Yeah.
Or is there something you look forward to in the future that you think might be a better way? Like, for example, this ballot access work that you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a really weird and I don't know, crusty fashion, I could have spent my $1 million better and gotten elected. I was naive. I didn't really understand that there's grift and stuff going on where you can like basically just buy the position. And I went about it in the fair manner. And I probably should have just spent the money to buy the position if I really wanted it. But I think that the experience was great. And if I had done that, I wouldn't feel good about myself either. So I feel like, it worked out all right. And yeah, I could have spent the money in another way. But also a lot of people say, what better could you have spent your money on than that experience? Because it's not an experience that most people get. It's probably not a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things for that kind of an experience. So, it was
I did want to add.
If you want somebody to coach you, I'll do it for half price, and I'll just say, you give me half the money, and I'll say, yeah, okay, don't do it, Lars.
Okay. Well, to be fair, most of my team told me, "Are you sure you want to do this?" So I kept saying yes, and so they kept going. But they were like, really, you want to spend all that money? Okay.
Well, that does bring up kind of a question, because when you did say that, that the money could make a big difference if it was maybe spent or given to the right person or spent in the right way, whatever that exactly means. But that does it kind of bring up the issue that, it does sound like the current LP is in a little bit of financial distress, it sounds like, and I'm not 100% sure what the status of that is, but is that a big factor? I mean, just sort of if there was a big cash injection from somebody, would that kind of pave the way to getting the next nomination?
Well, it doesn't work exactly like that, but there's enough people that control the inner workings of the party that if you just kind of bought everybody, you could do it. But that wouldn't have felt good to me. That wouldn't have been I like a fair game. And so that would have been sleazy, in my opinion. I wouldn't, and I know that that's politics, and that's what happens in the other parties and all the time and stuff. But that wasn't really what I was trying to do here, and so I was fine with that. And the Libertarian Party itself is definitely, I'm a bit, like I said, I'm a businessman. I've looked over tons and tons of business plans and budgets and that sort of thing, and it's in deep trouble, and so we'll see if they're able to pull it together and swing this. Stephen Nikela is the new chair, and he's got some plans, and I've talked to him and given him my thoughts on what he might be able to do to get fundraising going and that sort of thing, but we'll have to see if he's able to execute and make it happen. But I think it's good to have new blood in and maybe some new fresh ideas on putting the direction. So I'm willing to, wait and see, have a wait and see attitude.
And just for anybody who's watching too, I mean, this is one of the challenges that the Libertarian Party has that other parties don't have, in the sense that because we want to dismantle the system, there's not a lot of money backing us, right? I mean, there's, if we want to take the system apart, there's not, there's nothing to control afterwards. That's the goal. And so, I mean, consequentially, if to be in the Libertarian Party and to have a vote there, you actually have to pay to be a member of the party. I think it's like $25 a year or something like that. Yeah. But the other parties don't have that, but that's because there's so much money coming in from God knows where.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I mean, once it looks like you can win, then the money starts flowing, because they want to make sure that if you do win, that you're, that you're beholden to them, right? Our entire system is corrupt. You hear a lot of times, oh, big corporations buy our Congress people, and I say that, the corporations couldn't buy our Congress people if our Congress people were principled. Right. The buck stops with the Congress people, not the horrible, evil corporations, because if the corporations went to them and they said, we don't want your money because we're going to, do what's right for the people, then it would be a totally different story. But they don't do what's right for the people. It's literally whatever the corporations give money, that's what they're going to do. Right. And you see that all over the place right now.
Okay. So put yourself in the position of Donald Trump. And back in the campaign, last campaign, when Miriam Adelson offered him the second highest donation to his campaign last year of $100 million, that's $100 million. Of course, with the strings attached that, basically he'll be Israel's bitch and do whatever they want for whatever they, for as long as they want it to be done. Yeah. What should he have said? I'm sorry, but, I'm beholden to the American people, not to Israel. And yeah. I'm going to do what's best for America. And if it coincides with what's best for Israel also, then whoopee-doo. And we'll do it. Otherwise, I'm not going to do, what should he have said? And of course, we know that if he would have said the wrong thing, Miriam would have held on to her $100 million that she got from gambling. I will remind everyone.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Everything's for sale. Right, all of the votes are for sale, and you see it. You'll see things going through. It's like when Biden was in office, and you started seeing all these bills going through around green energy and green, solar panels and whatever. That we were spending all this money. One of the ones that really gets me is they passed this bill that was supposed to make it so that all the rural people in America got internet, really cheap internet, right? It was supposed to upgrade the internet for everybody, and it was something like, I don't know, a couple $1 billion or maybe 20 billion. It was some crazy ass number of money, and then they did it all, and they didn't get one subscriber hooked up, but the money's all gone, right? And literally, they could have done a deal with Elon Musk and gotten Starlink to all those places for I think it was like 1/20th the cost or even less, and everybody would be hooked up right now. But it's all about broing out the people who donated money to you. So if Elon didn't donate to them, he's not getting that contract. It's literally that simple, right? And if somebody's running a business that's opposite of the person who donated the money, then they use the government force to oppress that other corporation. They'll say, there's a regulation that says you can't do that. And we just passed a bill that says if your company starts with an X, I'm sorry, but you're not allowed to do business in America today. It's so corrupt and so broken. It's a rigged system, it really is all over the place.
Well, it's funny, too, that you mentioned the green issue. And here in California, one of the biggest boondoggles that we have is just an eyesore now sitting out there in the valley. But it's the tracks to the high-speed rail that doesn't have a high-speed rail. Yeah. And it's just a lot of sunken billions of dollars. And the crazy thing is that when that project started, when it started for all the wrong reasons, for one thing, I remember Jerry Brown was our governor at the time, and he took a trip to China, and he came back, and I remember seeing an article, and he was marveling at their high-speed train, and he said, we've got to get one of these. And I mean, I'm just thinking, that can't be the reason. I mean, it's like a solution in search of a problem.
No.
And now we've spent. It was supposed to be a high speed, but it wound up just like you're saying. Instead of taking the efficient route, which would have been taking Highway 5 and it wouldn't have been around a lot of people, it would have just been a high-speed route from the population centers, they decided to run it through everybody who had their hand in the pie on 99. And now it's a project that if it ever gets completed, it'll be a fast trip from Bakersfield to Fresno. In other words, nowhere California to nowhere California.
Yeah. It won't. I don't think it will ever get finished. It was so, the overruns were so huge. It was like $16 billion or something like that. It was triple or quadruple what they had anticipated, and they literally built nothing. But the real tragedy of all that was what they spent a lot of the money on was they went through and they eminent domained people's houses and people's farms, and people, they had been living there for 3 generations, and the government just came in and said, we need this property for the common good of a California citizen. You need to move, right? And they kicked them all out, and then they didn't build the thing. And so now these people have all been displaced. Their land has been stolen, and often at like cost or price that isn't what the fair market would have given them. And let alone the fact that you shouldn't be forced out of your own home by the government and have it be, stolen from you. So the whole thing was just a horrible boondoggle fiasco, and Moonbeam should, suck it for that. And Gavin Newsom was right on board with it too, so he can suck it too.
Well, it's even worse than that though, because if you ever drive down 99, you see these incomplete structures. I mean, it's like a testament to government inefficiency and corruption, and I mean, it's just nuts. And then the craziest thing is, we're probably going to see a high-speed line from Los Angeles to Vegas that's more market-driven, and that's going to wind up eclipsing this thing that's been going on for over a decade. It's just absolutely nuts.
Well, the government in California specifically, even in like local towns and that sort of thing, they keep pushing all these public transport kind of systems that really there's no demand for, right? And so the free market would not build these systems because there's no demand for it, but yet they build it, and then they want to like basically put the cost and expense of maintaining it on the taxpayers' back, when really none of the taxpayers are using it, right? And I think we would all prefer, me personally, I would prefer, if they are going to steal my money, at least they fix my road so that it isn't full of potholes and falling into the creek and stuff, way before they build some high-speed rail that I'm never ever going to use, even if they finished it.
Yeah. Well, there is one other thing I wanted to touch with you on. We've talked sort of about some of the crazy financial things that are going on, but there's also kind of some, the government is doing some potentially questionable things, I guess, on the civil liberties front. And one of those we just saw, it's right in the news, and it has to do with a whole bunch of probably mostly gangster immigrants that are being sent to El Salvador, which is like kind of like an unparalleled move, that we're taking these most likely problematic. I mean, one of the issues is there's a lot of secrecy around this, so we really don't know who these people are, but they're being sent to this supermax prison in El Salvador, and it's absolutely nuts. It's like something out of a movie. And James, maybe you could play, there's a quick video that we have that so people can see what we're talking about. It's video KOL 6. So I'm not hearing the sound that might have come with it, but this is essentially the supermax that's in El Salvador, and these are Tren de Aragua, most likely gang members that are being taken off. And part of the issue is they're claimed to be. Trump is trying to say that they've sent by the Venezuelan government, and so that's kind of the justification for saying that these aren't just normal migrants who happen to be criminals. That there's maybe an international issue going on here between countries, and so therefore he has more authority. But this is kind of I don't know. I mean, one of the things that concerns me is that I'm not even sure if they put a list of the names out. There was an article I saw from the AP where it talked about gosh, where is that? I think I have it right here. Oh, here it is, a Reuters article. And one of the things that they say in the summary of the article is they say the U.S. provides no details on the identities of the deported Venezuelans. And I mean, I can't think of a more basic thing for government if they're going to round people up and put them in any jail to at least say who got put in jail. I don't know. This is kind of nuts. What are your thoughts on this? This is,
I think no one on this call could guarantee that there isn't some U.S. citizen that has been thrown into that mix. If you wanted to disappear somebody out of America real quick and you didn't like them for political reasons or for whatever reasons, it'd be really easy to throw them on one of those buses, get them off to El Salvador, and basically disappear them. And it's like we've heard all of our lives about China, where these vans will just pull up and grab you off the side of the street, throw you in the van, and you're disappeared. Right, like that's a common thing that and you also see that in Russia, where they will come. You'll be on the street, and you'll have some dissident that they don't like, and you're just rolled up and put away. And so, I think all the people on this call probably would also agree that we don't want violent criminals running around on our streets and harming people and doing harm. And so, but I don't think this fixes that. Right. That's the problem here, is that I don't think that this fixes that. We had so many years where we had people who were deported who came back in, killed somebody, those things. But it's such a tiny percent of the immigration, population that it's I just don't see it as being really great to do this. And why aren't we putting these people through due process, right? Why aren't we like having a judge say, okay, you did this bad thing, and so now you're deported, and you're like, okay, and why are we sending them to a prison if we're not giving them their due process in court? What authority do we have to put people in prison if we didn't give them due process, right?
And this brings up an issue too, because it's not like in a normal situation where if they just grabbed a migrant who was illegally here, they might be detained and they might be putting into detention center until they had their day in front of a judge. But this isn't even that. This is putting people in a jail that is like, and they haven't even specified how long they're going to be there, which it may be years. And that's kind of scary.
Well, and I mean, you have to also like follow the money on this, right? I mean, because somebody's paying somebody to keep those prisoners there. American tax dollars are paying El Salvadorian something or other to keep those prisoners there. And make no mistake, they're not doing it for free. You know what I mean? And so, like, who's getting paid off? Who is in on the graft on this one? Because you got to know it's insane, right? Because I don't remember what the numbers are, but in America we pay like $40,000 a year or something per prisoner. I'm just kind of pulling that number out of my head.
I think in California we pay in excess of $100,000 per prison per year.
And so I think the justification part of this was, I read somewhere that they were like, oh well, this country's going to do it for a lot less than if we house it in America, right? But the people. My whole family comes from, or not all of it, but half of my family comes from criminals who were sent out of England into Australia, right? And then they were too criminal for Australia, and so they were sent to America. And so that's how part of my family ended up here, And it's like, when you force somebody to another country, let's say that one of those guys was innocent, and he gets released into El Salvador. What's his chances of making it back into the United States? Like, you're basically, expelled with no due process. I just find the whole thing offensive, but I'm not making light of the fact that we shouldn't have, we shouldn't have rules for people who harm other people, right? Like the really gnarly gang members that have done criminal acts. I mean, they should be held accountable for their stuff. But I also believe in the rule of law, and that we don't just do this, because there's just too much room for corruption and for doing shady shenanigans, which I absolutely know that that's going to be the case. We'll read about it in 40 years and we'll all shake our head about how horrible it was that 300 people that were American citizens were rounded up and put into this prison along with the rest of the people, and nobody knew about it. And their families were fighting for 20 years to try to get them out of the extra. It just, like, if your kid was rounded up and thrown in that prison, and you knew about it, it would be heartbreaking, and you'd be doing everything in your power to get them out, and you would know that they were like not guilty, but there would be no way for you to prove it, right? So I don't like it. It stinks, and But I do think we have to protect Americans, and we have to keep bad actors out of the system. So it's kind of, we need to do both, but the way they're going about it, I don't like.
Yeah. My main issue is the due process issue, because I could see if maybe they wanted to send a signal to really, terrible cartels or something, that, hey, you come in here and it may not be whatever you're used to, but my gosh, you still need due process, because you need to make sure that you got the right person at the very least. And I just can't believe that people are, I guess, so comfortable with, especially after going through COVID and all the lies that the government told us then. You would think that'd be kind of a wake-up call, that it doesn't matter which administration it is, the incentives are all going to be there for similar things to happen. So,
and my wife's family, they were in Alaska, and they got rolled up during World War II in the Japanese internment camps, right? And that was another tragedy, where we actually rolled up all these American citizens just based on the look of them, and said, you guys are probably terrorists and you could be a threat to America, so we're going to put you in these camps. And they weren't pleasant places to be, and they were there for way too long. And 99% of them were or maybe even 99.9% of them were of zero threat to American, and we just rolled them up like they were cattle, and they were American citizens. And you can dismiss it, but if it was your family, you would be really pissed off that happened to you, and you'd be like, how could this even happen in America, right? But a lot of people just discount it. Oh, it was for national security or whatever, and it's like, I don't ever want to be rolled up for national security reasons and thrown in a camp. I don't know about you guys, but that's not what I want in my life.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's so disturbing, is because, especially in that case, those were actually American citizens, like you're saying. And I mean, the idea that the Constitution, that is supposed to be, I guess, the closest thing we have to a contract with our government about what our protections are with it, and the idea that that's just completely discarded because we have the fear, which is kind of like COVID and a lot of these other things, where you just lose your rights when everybody gets afraid. So
it's 2025, and we should have learned by now that we don't put people in camps. That every time that humans put other humans in camps, bad stuff happens. I think maybe we should learn our lesson from history, that we should stop putting people in camps and give people their due process.
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised that we didn't quite get there with COVID.
I mean, that was like Australia did that, right? They were rounding people up and putting them in camps, and I looked at that and I just couldn't believe it, But then I made that connection, like, oh, this is just like what they did in America in the Japanese internment camps. It's the same thing, and we all know what happened in Germany, and it was, that kind of stuff was just terrific, right? So I'm not in favor of putting people in camps. I'm in favor of giving people dignity and their due process.
Well, you'll have to put that lesson on to the other lessons, like you can't bomb people into democracy, and you can't, you can't print into prosperity, print money into prosperity. All these other lessons.
You mean MMT is a lie, Tim?
All these other lessons we seem to continuously redo over and over and over and over, and so somebody's getting rich on it. You brought up follow the money, and some of us aren't. Most of us aren't, unfortunately. Well, fortunately.
Well, I think there was one other issue around this as well, and that same issue has sparked, I guess, a confrontation, maybe a constitutional crisis, beyond just putting people in jail without saying who they are. But the idea that a judge has said that they wanted review of this before it happens, and the idea that the prisoners were, I guess, continued to be sent there regardless. I guess there was some questions about whether they're over international water or not, but regardless, a judge made the order, and it was kind of almost like thumbing their nose at the judge, and that has actually caused Trump to put out, I guess, social media text saying that the judge should be impeached, and that has brought the Supreme Court, at least a reference from Judge Roberts, to say that, hey, this is a scary territory you're starting to enter in here too. We haven't talked about impeaching judges for, I believe, over 200 years, so that's where they're going with it now. So you guys have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I put out a post on X earlier today about this, where essentially there's a couple things, and I talked about it, how we have these partisan judges and that they're beholden to the two parties. And so I feel like we might need to, I mean, it wouldn't really fix it, but it might help a little, is that instead of having judges be appointed, we move to electing our judges, by the process that we do now. And then additionally, we might want to have term limits on judges so that they are, they're not they're not in there for the career, they're in for a service position, right? Especially like high level judges, like federal judges and Supreme Court judges and that sort of thing. We might want to have some more turnover in that position so that people don't get too full of power, and we kind of spread it around a little bit. I think, they both do it. Both Democrats and Republicans do it. When Joe Biden is trying to push something through, the Republican, lawmakers and judges are all trying to like squash it down. And then when it flips over the other side, and it's what I alluded to in the beginning of the thing, is that you have one group of people trying to force their will on another group of people, and they don't like it when it's happening to them. But then as soon as they get into power, they do the same thing, and they both feel like they have the moral high ground, and they're righteous, and the other people are bad. And the reality of it is they're both horrible. They're both not doing good things for the American people. They don't have the American people's best interest at heart. It's all about graft and corruption and the money flow, it's such a big and challenging and daunting situation that fixing it is going to be really hard, right? But the things that I've kind of like alluded to that I'm working on, of trying to create basically a free market in American politics, is what I'm really trying to do, is because I believe that competition breeds excellence, right? It brings out the best of us. And if we don't have any competition, we're just going to continue to get mediocre, crappy candidates, and they're going to serve us in the same crappy manner that we've been having for all of my life, basically. I haven't voted in my entire life for any congressman who has won. So I've never felt represented ever in my entire life, right? And when people don't feel represented, they get pissed off. They don't feel like they have a voice. And there was a recent statistic that said 1 in 5 Americans believe that violence is the answer to our political problems. And I think you saw that in both the BLM riots, and then in January 6th. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. A lot of people don't feel their voice is being heard, and that they're being listened to by their government or the people that represent them. And if you go on long enough like that, the end result is civil war and a lot of people dying. And so I would like to fix that. And I believe the way to fix that is to unrig our election systems by making it more transparent and easy to participate in.
Yeah. Lars, one thing you said there too about the fix with judges is potentially electing them, but I think that has to go hand in hand with shrinking government, because part of the problem is that I mean, I know that currently there are some judges that wind up on the local ballot when I go to vote, and usually there's like no information, right? It's like you just have no attention span for beyond the few top people that are on the ballot, and so this is part of the problem. Is even if they are being elected, we just don't have enough time with the dispersed amount of interest that people have in the election. So
I don't disagree. Is that Americans have attention span of a TikTok feed, and like to actually like do due diligence. Most of the people I know, when I talk to them about, did you read the voter pamphlet? Did you read up on all the things? And I can tell you the same. When it gets down to the local positions, the harbor master and the whatever thing, like I just pick the name. Like, unless I know the guy, I just pick the name that sounds the best with the like maybe it tells you, because they don't even put any things in there. They don't even talk about the person, like what this person did this or this is their qualifications. They give you nothing, and literally just the name, and you're like, Bob is a better name than Joe, so I'm going for Bob. And it's like,
yeah. Well, that's why it seems like you can
Is
only.
this true confessions? Because I've done the same thing.
But this is why it seems like the only hope is smaller government, because if you shrink it, then you have less things to pay attention to, and therefore maybe you can have a hope of at least keeping track of it. So.
Yes, can we get that? I want that right away. Less government. That's like that's my North Star. That's what I'm always heading for, because it's clear the more government we get, the more mediocre we become. And government breeds mediocrity, and I don't want to be mediocre. I want us to excel, and I think that the way to excel is to like get the government off of all of our backs and let us live peaceful and productive lives without being coerced and forced to abide by the other side's idea of how you should live your life.
So I've got a question. So if you're a competition breeds innovation, free market kind of guy, what do you think about big, beautiful tariffs?
Yeah. I think the tariffs, if you look back in history, there's been a few presidents that have enacted tariffs, and in a big way, kind of in this manner, and it's never ended well. They've always gone back on the tariffs that they put in, because this economy starts falling apart and the jobs start, disappearing. I think it's the way that he sold it really resonated with people. And then the way that he sold it was like, look, these other countries are competing against us unfairly, and so we have to retaliate to them. And then when we retaliate to them, that's going to drive all these jobs back, and Americans are going to have better paying jobs. But the reality of it is those jobs are never coming back, because we over-regulated the system, and we made the system so non-competitive that those jobs are just never coming back. It doesn't matter if you put 100% tariffs on it, they're not coming back, right? And really all this does is harm everybody, because it drives up the prices of everything. And you see this tit for tat kind of a situation going on, and during my campaign, I said that, trade wars lead to real wars. And then I posted like probably 20 wars that were started because of tariffs, right? Because it's like, oh, you're screwing us and you're screwing my people. And then the people get upset because they're not making as much money and they're not selling their goods. So they hate the other side, and that breeds more animosity, and it just keeps breeding it. Like, no, I mean, there's much better ways that we could protect our employees and our people, and try to drive jobs to America. One of my plans during my campaign was to supercharge our energy production so that we drastically reduce the cost of energy. And I think that would really boost GDP across the board. If we could drop energy prices by 50%, the GDP would skyrocket, and everybody in America would be doing better, because you wouldn't have to put so much money in your gas tank and all the stuff that you buy and all that kind of stuff. But instead of like focusing on being super productive, they're just focusing on protectionist stuff, which I don't see it as being really beneficial or being really forward thinking in how we could make America better, which was what they were promising everybody, right?
Yeah. Although I do think, though, that I think Trump wants to increase the oil production sector and stuff, so that we're a net exporter and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
no, he's talked about doing some of the energy stuff that I was talking about doing, and I'm all for that. And there's things that Trump's doing that I, on the surface, approve of, but I just, in general, on the trade stuff, I think there's better things that we could be doing than this tit for tat tariff thing. I think I think a lot of it is posturing. And I think a lot of these tariffs are going to disappear over the next 60 days or so. But we'll see. I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch for sure.
My biggest fear with all of this is that, he may wind up having some of the right ideas on some of these things, but his rhetoric is terrible. And so if the people buy into the rhetoric, if people who don't understand economics are thinking, this is great, then, well, what happens when Trump is gone? If you assume that he was actually doing the right thing, then now you got somebody else and they say, well, what are we going to do now? Well, Trump said tariffs are great. Let's go do tariffs. I mean, that's the rhetoric that he's left everybody with, like it's a free lunch. And, Yeah, it's
interesting because, he put tariffs on in his first term, and Biden left all those tariffs on. Yeah. He didn't get rid of the tariffs that Trump had put on in the first term. So that I found that quite interesting. I don't know what the reasoning behind that was, but the numbers that he's pushing around right now are pretty draconian. They're, across the board, whatever, 20, 30, 40%. And I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts right now. The whole us getting out of Ukraine and stopping sending money to Ukraine, and the Europeans kind of picking up the slack means that a lot of money is moving to Europe to help cover all the military stuff that's starting to build up over there, and that's going to cause some more economic problems here at home too. So there's a lot of challenges. In some ways, I'm glad I didn't end up being president, because it's a tough job. There's a lot of moving parts to think about.
Yeah, it's funny when Biden won in 2020, I was thinking, well, he doesn't know what he's gotten himself into after COVID lockdown.
He wasn't there, so he couldn't know what he got himself into.
All they needed was like Musk said, a dank puppet, a dank sock puppet. But I guess we're pretty much getting close to the end of the show here, and one of the things we usually do is our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, where it's something silly, somebody said silly. I don't know if you guys have time enough to stick around for a quick Knucklehead Noise Patrol, or
Sure, knuckle noise patrol it away. I don't know what it is, but I'll find out.
Well, it's usually something that somebody said that is kind of silly, and so we play. Well, this time it's actually a St. Patrick's Day related thing, and so there was a St. Patrick's Day parade in Toronto, and let me bring that up. So apparently you had some kind of rowdy protesters, and this is by Not the Bee brought this article up, but these protesters, they were apparently Irish for Palestine, which, it seemed fine, that's their thing, we got a message, but they wound up sort of jumping into the thing, and then they wound up sort of denigrating the whole purpose of the parade, which was to celebrate St. Patrick's, which is just like, messaging people. You're trying to convince these people to join you. Well, anyways, let me show the video. This is KNP1, and it sort of shows what happened there, where these people sort of inserted themselves into the parade, and then when they start talking to people, they're kind of nuts. So, James, can you play KNP1?
This is normal?
We're in the parade. It's normal for us now, I guess.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Fuck St. Patrick.
What do you mean?
He's a killer. He killed people. He got rid of people. He genocided people.
Let me just ask one of my advisors. Mitch, is there any truth to that?
No. Oh, yeah. As if you would know. And as if you would tell the truth. I'm part Irish, so I would know. Yeah, and none of us here are Irish. And as if you've been taught the truth. Go look it up. You guys know this guy's charges for pedophilia in his camp? What about your pedophilia charges? Yeah. Is it pedophilia charges? He does have.
He looks like a pedophile.
Yes, he does.
Can you go into more detail about that?
You know all the details.
Please, I'm very curious. Let me go. Let's go. Out of here.
Thank He just called you a pedophile.
I heard. He is. It's gotta go. Come on.
So anyway, it just seems like this is in Toronto, so it's not Democrats, but it just feels like the left can't help themselves. I mean, they've got this branding problem, and then they're out there and they've got a cause that a lot of people think has some merit, and then they're going to sit there, go to St. Patrick's Day parade and say, screw St. Patrick. I just don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, I got two things out of that. One was I was like, wow, that's a lot of Karens in one spot. And then the other thing was that everybody in that clip was pissed off. There was nobody happy. Like they would have been better served just staying at home at that point. It was just like, I'll end with this, is that when I was a kid, I think it was the Ronald Reagan election, my grandma had voted, and I said, Grandma, who'd you vote for? And she said, well, I'm not telling you, it's none of your business. And I was like, oh, come on, Grandma, it's just me, and I'm not going to tell anybody who you voted for, but I want to know who you voted for. And she said, no, that's none of your business. We don't talk about politics. It's like, I go to the ballot box, I vote, and it's none of your business. And I think Grandma had it right, to be honest with you. I think we wear our politics way too much on our open sleeve these days, and that it divides us when we don't need to be divided the way that we are. And I think that's, social media and the media, they use it to like divide us. And I think that if we talked a lot less about politics, we'd all probably be a lot happier.
I think it'd be a lot easier to talk less about politics if government were smaller.
All right, fair enough. I like that. That's a good point.
Well, Tim, I don't know if you have any thoughts, but otherwise I was going to hand it over to Lars. So, Lars, did you have any last messages you wanted to leave the audience with about your group? Any websites you wanted to bring back up? I did bring up the webpage that was mentioned on one of the documents. So this is morevoterchoicefund.org. So I'm not sure if that's in stages of completion or not. Or
we're still fleshing out the website a little bit. We got a new website coming that's going to be more robust. But essentially, what we're doing is we are putting together a group of people to sort of follow all the different ballot laws that are coming in all 50 states. So we have a pretty big task to kind of monitor all that. And then when we identify some laws that are coming through that we don't like, or some laws that we are in favor of, what we're trying to do is build a network of people around the country and the different states that we can activate them when their state is doing something that we don't like, or that they could call their constituents and say, hey, we like this bill and pass it, or we don't like this bill and pass it. And so the idea is just literally to get more choice, more voices on the ballot. More choices is kind of a thing that I was always pushing in my campaign, and I think it's still important to have that competition. And I don't really think we're going to have any change in American politics until we get a free market in our American politics.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Lars, and to our audience out there. Before the next show, think about what you can be doing in your community. I mean, Lars is starting this new project to try and democratize the voting process, and we've talked with all kinds of other people who are running for local elections or other things that they're doing to promote liberty. So think about what you can do in your neighborhood, because I tell you, there's no way we're going to be able to keep our liberty if everybody isn't involved in the fight. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.